Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Armando Verdiel. I am the Technical Development Supervisor for Lighting Design Lab. Today, we have a special presentation by our colleagues at the Electrification and Strategic Technologies Division of Seattle City Light. Seattle's municipal utility is leveraging a millionaire grant from the state of Washington to implement a microgrid at a community center in the Capitol Hill neighborhood. The utility's commitment in testing emerging technologies and learning best practices through trials are a key reason it remains a leader in the region when it comes to delivering energy services. Without further ado, I will leave you with Bianca Smith, Project Manager for the Microgrid, and Uzma Siddiqi, Senior Grid Modernization Manager. Take it away.
Hi Armando. Hi everyone. Thanks for joining. I am Bianca, and this morning Uzma and I are going to walk you through why and how we are exploring microgrids at City Light. So if you can advance to the next slide. So I wanted to start with some great quotes as to why these systems are worth pursuing. I would like to focus on the one by David. If you've seen one microgrid, you've seen one microgrid. I feel this highlights how reading about other implementations and researching the technology and process can only take you so far. So in order for us to truly understand how a microgrid can impact our system or how we could potentially control and operate it, we need one on our system and we need to implement it ourselves. Next. So what is a microgrid? If there are some trying to explore this themselves, it is a group of loads and resources that are able to operate in both grid connected and islanded mode. That's key. As you can see in the highlighted green words in the larger definition by the Department of Energy. And just to note, I mean, there are many types of microgrids. There are full station microgrids, full feeder microgrids, or partial feeder microgrids, and single customer microgrids. And so this project, we started small. This is a customer microgrid as we are installing a microgrid technology at a community center. Next slide. All right. So here is a simple graphic that shows the main components of our microgrid. You see the solar on the roof and the battery on site. Yep.
Armando, I think the next slide, please.
Next slide.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, technical difficulties we're working through. So yes, so this is the Clean Energy Fund Solar Microgrid for Resiliency. And this is that simple graphic with the solar on the roof. You have the battery on site. Then you have the microgrid controller that kind of can sense when the grid has had an outage and it goes into island mode, and then also senses when the grid is back up and it goes back to grid forming. And so I represented that with the on and off switch. It's much more complicated than that, but that kind of just gets the concept of a microgrid is able to operate autonomously from the macro grid, the utility grid, in its small little island mode, or it could be big island mode. Next slide. So why install microgrid? So the goal of this project is to empower our community to recover quickly. Resiliency is our primary use case, which is one main reason why we are installing microgrids in Seattle. And so these systems can make us more resilient in the next windstorm or black swan event. They can also be used for frequency regulation and distribution deferral, providing vital grid benefits. And we'll kind of go through those use cases in a little more detail. But also, like here in Seattle, we strive to be green and to educate our customers on how they can contribute to decarbonization. And so a solar and battery microgrid incorporates clean energy generation and provides another tool and option to the diesel generator. And so piloting these new technologies kind of allows us to better prepare for when these systems are prevalent within our service territory, because our leadership points out our future is now, as you see in bold letters there. And this pilot is enabling us to effectively update interconnection agreements and develop a distribution standard for batteries and microgrids, and seeing like what's applicable and what's not applicable with this pilot's technical knowledge and learnings. And we'll go over some benefits as well later. Next slide.
Bianca, sorry to quick interruption here. I did not mention this, but attendees, you notice that you are muted. But if you do want to engage with us and ask questions, we encourage it. Just use it, the chat menu at the bottom right of your GoToWebinar dashboard. Thank you. Sorry, that was it.
Awesome. All righty. And we have some time, I think, at the end for questions as well, so we can always go back if needed. But just to kind of take a step back, at the next slide, we have like the grant state for the State Department of Commerce. We were able to kind of pursue this pilot through funding we were awarded by the State Department of Commerce through their Clean Energy Fund grants. And these grants aim to support developing and integrating new technologies that support our clean energy goals. And so the use cases we chose to demonstrate were resiliency, renewable integration, distribution deferral, and frequency regulation. So resiliency is our primary use case, as I mentioned. We're going to show how it can operate in grid-connected and islanded mode, which again, in case of an outage, it islands by disconnecting from the utility grid, providing increased operational resiliency. And just as a technical note, both transfers from grid-connected or islanded mode are break before make transfers, meaning that there will be a short-term outage to transfer from the utility grid to the microgrid and back to the grid. Not like hours, it's probably like a few minutes maybe. This, as you saw in the DOE definition, is a key functionality of a microgrid. We also want to see how these systems can improve our distribution system. So our new renewable integration use case, the battery energy storage system and solar will operate together to integrate the variable solar generation. So the battery will alleviate rapid output changes from the solar caused by a changing cloud cover. And Uzma, feel free to jump in if you want to add anything on these use cases. And then our distribution deferral use case will be modeled by UW. So this will demonstrate if these systems can support load growth and allow for an electrical system upgrade deferment or postponing an electrical system upgrade with a non-wires alternative approach using a battery or a microgrid. And so this analysis will be based on like measurements and models. Our grid support and ancillary services use case is frequency regulation, which will also be modeled by UW. And we hope to demonstrate and determine the frequency regulation reserve capability at the microgrid site, meaning what support can this system give the grid if there is stress on the grid. So the available frequency regulation reserves will be kind of quantified and modeled continually during all use cases to understand overall the availability of the service. Or if we extrapolate this system size and look to see at what size would this system or grid support be a valuable demonstrated use case. Next slide. So as you see, we are working with several groups and a lot of community partners as well, I think that aren't captured here. When you see Seattle City Light and Seattle Parks and Recreation, Department of Commerce, and soon their communities all come with it. And that's how, like, looking at the benefits of the system with all these teams. So just to kind of go through them, DNV Energy USA, which is their name now, is our owner's engineer and was hired for their microgrid expertise. And so we've done competitive bid process to have like a thorough evaluation on making sure our subcontractors had the experience of a microgrid and have done a system of similar size and have actually implemented this before. So we wanted that approach. And they helped, our owner's engineer helped evaluate sites for the microgrid, select our prime contractor, which is Worley, and have performed design reviews and site inspections. And they will continue to oversee and inspect deliverables through testing and commissioning. The University of Washington will be gathering data and perform quantitative and qualitative analysis of the microgrid, looking at the community and system benefits. Worley and Uzma will go in more detail on their work later. So Worley is designing and building the microgrid with Puget Sound Solar as a subcontractor, with NEC, which is our battery manufacturer, and Trimark, who is the provider of the microgrid controller. And so our contracting approach to have a owner's engineer and design build firm has proven to be valuable given the level of uncertainty this project brings with kind of customer-sided equipment. You know, we're actually beyond the meter, and that's new for the utility. And City Light and Parks have a shared funding model where like City Light has the funding and Parks has the site. So this is kind of a mutually beneficial partnership. And again, the Department of Commerce awarded us a grant to carry out our scope. And so again, like I think as the project went on, I think as we gather learnings and have a final report delivered, which we're going to share, and the Commerce is going to share, we'll show kind of everything that's final. So I think we've had some capital increases and asset increases just from scope being added. So like 1.8 million may be higher, will be higher. And so that will all be captured. But, you know, we originally started the project and wanted it one way, but we have to work with the community and shift things. And there's just things that come up. So for instance, like network security is a part of the project, but may not be a part of the grant scope, as well as physical security. So we did take a kind of a defense in depth approach for this project being our first one. Next slide. So now to the community center, if you can see that picture and the children playing and like they have events, and I think everyone's waiting for them to be operational again and open to the community. Right now they're not, but they're a very, very active site and in the heart of the community in Capitol Hill, and right, they have a middle school nearby as well as like a park, and they host all types of events. They have like, now even COVID, they have like a teen learning hub, and they have a shower program that they use for any unsheltered. So they're very, very active, and they've been there throughout everything during the pandemic. And so again, our site is the Seattle Department of Recreation Community Center. And again, this location's in Capitol Hill. It's adjacent to a middle school. But Miller was selected after a thorough feasibility study of community centers that did not have a diesel generator. So Miller was found to be structurally sound to install a long-term microgrid. And given the location with a large population, it was also providing a lot of community benefits. So some factors that led to the decision were, you know, did the center have or was planned to have a diesel generator for resiliency? Because some generators that were like level 1 and level 2, you see we put level 3 here, were actually like level 1 or shelter community centers during emergency rent. So they have like these large generators that are sized for 7 days full load. And level 2 kind of have plans on adding some. So we wanted to kind of like give a new site resiliency and a backup power system and look at this in comparative to a diesel generator system. So that's kind of how we selected Miller. And then we looked at the structural integrity of the facility, like if it could house a 14-year microgrid, community benefits, and did it have space to locate a battery and electrical equipment? Because, you know, technology is advancing, they're becoming smaller, but for safety, there's a lot of footprint that you need around the battery to make sure for fire safety code. So that was also a part of the evaluation. So we did a feasibility study, and Miller came out as a site that would be agreed upon to host the microgrid. And from there, we went into determining the equipment size that was needed to meet the demand of the community center, which is a great segue to Uzma and the next slide, assessing resiliency.
Actually, we have a quick question from the audience. Yeah. Bianca, do you know if this area has power outages on a frequent basis?
They've experienced outages, but I think our grid is pretty resilient. And
awesome.
I think they've had, I don't have the data with me, but they've probably had maybe one outage this year due to kind of like COVID things, but it's not like they have outages all the time. So for an emergency event, if there was like an earthquake, or Parks has talked about, this could be used as a dispatch of supplies center, like where they can have their staff come and distribute supplies to the community. We've talked to like the local church and like other departments that are nearby who are like, if this is here, then I know I can like help with supplies here if it's only going to be for emergency response personnel. Wow. Because they have like a detailed emergency response plan. And so I think Parks is looking at, after they see the performance, like how can we start integrating this into that emergency response plan and putting it as a location point, because it's like in a pretty populated area and a really prime location for the city during an event where they could use it to distribute supplies, or use it for staff to come and like charge phones or like get things together if other sites are without power.
Great.
All right. Uzma.
All right, so next slide, please. Thanks, Bianca. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to share my excitement about this project. There we go. Thank you. So you've heard about how Miller Community is a part of the community, and how we chose this particular location. It was a body of work to actually kind of narrow down from the large number of total community centers within the city of Seattle to the location that we wanted to place it at. So first step, find the location. Second step, figure out what the microgrid needs to look like, right? So there are lots of options. So our owner's engineer ran 200 scenarios and lots of different things. What if there are 40 occupants? What if there are 120 occupants? What if the outage is of different durations? So you can see on this chart, it's an example. It's not the actual one that we selected, but it's a great example. It's in late March. It's a cloudy day. There are 40 occupants. They're estimating a 48-hour outage. They assumed 125 kW of solar and a 90 kW battery, and they also assumed a diesel generator. And they said, what about this? What if we built this system? And we stepped back and kind of did a critical analysis and said, well, we don't want a diesel generator. It doesn't align with our organizational values. We're a green utility, so that's out. And so they went back to the drawing board, looked at some of the other cases, and next slide. And this is the after give and take. You know, I'm making this the story really short. You can imagine that it was more than one conversation. We came up with this layout or kind of characteristics, requirements. We wanted a 200 kilowatt, but a 4-hour system, so that becomes an 800 kilowatt hour. And we wanted to make sure that it covered all loads that we had identified within the community center, with about 40 people occupying, and we wanted to make sure that on any day of the year it would cover at least a 16-hour outage. So you can see on the chart, I love graphs, that you can turn equipment off, right? So if you just turn some lights off, your microgrid is going to be resilient for longer. You can do things like energy efficiency, which of course is something in advance of an outage event. That could help the existing system that we're installing to last longer. You could add lighting systems, some kind of a management or sensors to help the duration of the microgrid. So 16 hours is kind of our least number of resiliency hours. We're excited that for many hours, well, for every hour more, for every other hour of the year, it probably will be longer than 16 hours.
Yeah, I think it's best case scenarios, initial analysis, like 55 hours. It's nice. So
much longer, because the solar ends up charging the battery. In the 16-hour example, it's pretty much on battery only. So next slide, please. This is a Google Maps view of the community center, and you can see that there are some nice big flat roofs, which are perfect for solar arrays. Next slide. So not only do you need to think about where solar is going to go, but what about all this new electrical equipment?
Next slide.
I am still seeing the Google Maps.
Yeah.
We're having a little trouble forwarding slides. Technology, a new challenge. You think you know what you're doing, get it under control.
It's loading.
Something changes. It's loading.
See the word.
All right, well, I'll start talking.
But there's a playground. You can see the playground to the other side. Okay, here we go.
There we go. So we needed to figure out where that new electrical equipment was going to go. We had decided that we didn't want to put the large lithium-ion batteries indoors, and really didn't want to impact the footprint of the building. So you can see the yellow space. It's indicated as new outdoor microgrid electrical area. So that was a pre-existing space that had the spot where the generator would have connected if they brought in a temporary generator. And there was, we were going to put the battery kind of on a lovely green piece of a knoll about 100 feet away. During the design, the team decided that, hey, you know, there's a dumpster. Let's swap the dumpster and the battery. So the battery and all the electrical equipment is now contiguous, connected right there in that yellow area, as I said, and the dumpster has moved. So it's all on the north side of the community center. All right, next slide. So as I've described, it's a pretty simple schematic. We take the existing community center loads. They're fed by either the battery or the solar, and the microgrid controller is the device that makes sure that in islanded mode, everything stays connected and served, and then during non-islanded mode, it's operating directly connected to the grid. So next slide. We've thought a lot about the data related to the microgrid, and you can see it's color-coded. You can see some parallels between the data flow and the electrical flow. So the data is routed through the microgrid controller to a cloud-based application, and the data is coming in from both. So it's actually two battery systems. It's 100 kilowatt, 400 kilowatt hour twice, and 3 solar sets of solar arrays. So and through the inverters, and so that all comes into the microgrid. And our control center folks and other interested parties within Seattle City Light are able to monitor the operation of this microgrid through that cloud-based application. Next slide. So part of the reason that the state of Washington gave us money for this is to perform analytics. And Bianca talked about the use cases. And we want to look at more situations. The analytics we're going to produce a report and provide it to the state, but we're also going to be looking at what are the other benefits that we can get from this microgrid, and that'll be kind of an ongoing process. And as Bianca said, some of the projects, some of the use cases are ones that we can actually measure, and some we're going to take a little bit of data from and add a layer of modeling, and that's being done by the University of Washington's Electrical Engineering Department. Next slide. So this is my favorite diagram because I'm an electrical engineer, and one lines are just really cool. You can see that we start, the top left hand is where it comes in from the grid. The orange circle is the new main panel that was added. The green is the solar, the yellow is the battery, and then the blue is the existing electrical system. So we needed to connect to the existing system without making any significant changes. There isn't a lot of place within the community center for us to get a new electrical room. You can imagine that for them, for the folks who use the community center, for the folks who manage that community center, if we'd come in and said, hey, can we have 10 by 10 square feet of space inside the building, they would have said, well, but you're going to displace this and this and this. So we're really sensitive about making sure that we're partnering with the users and the folks who manage the community center. So you can see, comes in, bunch of new stuff, connects to the existing stuff. Mm-hmm. Next slide. The next slide shows the various components. Fortunate enough to take a trip to the microgrid site about 2 weeks ago. On the right-hand side, through the trees, you can see the service transformer. It's fed overhead, and then it comes down to weatherhead into this enclosure, which is intended to be hard to get into. I never say anything is something proof because somebody can prove me wrong. And then you see the utility metering. You'll notice that 1 meter is in, and there's kind of this covers right now for the other 2 meters. We chose to include the devices in the microgrid into our AMI system, and those meters are, I'm not sure if they're installed quite yet, but the intent is to install them before the system energizes. So not only will we be able to tell what the connection from the customer which is the meter that's installed, looks like to the grid, but we'll be able to actually include the battery and the solar in our analysis and in the AMI data that we have. And AMI is an automated metering infrastructure. We've recently moved from meters that somebody needs to go at and actually look at what the dial is saying or what the number says to a system that communicates to a massive database. So these meters will be talking to that massive database. Next slide. So just kind of moving down that electrical one line. This is the main panel board. It has a Schweitzer Engineering Lab and SEL 351 relay. The switchgear was made by Eaton, and the microgrid controller is by Trimark, and that's where their HMI, their human machine interface, is located. So it's in the stainless steel box. Most of this stuff was NEMA 3R and stainless equipment. It is an outdoor location, so we were cognizant of that and made sure that the design kept what was appropriate for those locations. So next slide. Ta-da! 48 kW of solar and 3 large inverters. It's on, most of it is on the big portion of the roof, which is on the gym. A second smaller portion is on one of the other. I don't remember whether it's roof B or C or A. They're labeled. B. There. Bianca knows the answer. All right. Next slide. Oh, just one comment. For the roof, it was really important that we not break through the membrane. So it's a system that sits on top of the roof, weighed down. All right, next slide. In the next slide, you get to take a look at my artistic photography. The center picture is a picture of the battery, and I took it through the fence. So I won't be quitting my day job to become a photographer. Good news.
That's a non-conductive fence, another little component, right?
It's a non-conductive fence, that's right. It's plastic or some kind
fiberglass.
of
fiberglass.
Or fiberglass, there we go. So if you look on the right-hand side, that is what the batteries look like. I took a picture of about half of one of the stacks of battery. Then in the center is the battery enclosure itself. And then on the right-hand side is the control system, so make sure that the battery operates correctly. Next slide.
Hey, Uzma, I have a couple of questions if you don't mind real quick.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Awesome. Going back one slide. Question 1 says, have any future new on-site renewable power generation been considered, for example, such as stormwater, micro hydro turbines, or micro wind power? Has any other on-site renewable power been considered for the microgrid?
I think we would be open. Part of locating something at a community center is that we want to make sure that our partner, the Parks Department, is open also. So I would say let's just talk about a small wind turbine. If we were to get one, we'd have to find funding. We'd have to then reach out to parks and make sure that they're on board, and only then could we really implement it. Bianca, how do you see it?
Yeah, I think it's just looking at, like, we have to integrate it too with the service. So I think looking at that as well. So I think even if there's other customers who are interested in a different type of renewable generation that's not solar into a microgrid, and we can obviously, I think our goal is to work with those customers, and the point of the pilot is to make sure we're proactive on knowing what to expect and how to react and act to get them what they desire in the way that they want.
In a truly electrical engineering geeky kind of way, we do have spare breakers. So that part, we're ready.
Awesome. One more question on the solar panels. Was there a need for any additional structural support for those PV panels on the roof?
Yeah, so part of the analysis when we chose Miller Miller Community Center was we talked to the structural engineering folks. And Bianca, there was a significant amount of work done.
Yeah.
That was one of the criteria that
we
that
had to
caused
have the
some
structural
other
integrity. So like they assessed like the trusses on the roof and to make sure like some of the sites were disqualified because they still had wooden trusses, which we wouldn't want to add that for structural integrity. And so we did a full membrane assessment where we had structural engineers come out, do an initial site visit, and then do another thorough membrane assessment to determine, okay, we could put solar on this roof. It's good to last for the 14 years, the structural integrity of the roof. So there was nothing needed additional to site the solar. And I think it's actually pretty light. Like it looks like a lot of equipment, but I think it's only a few pounds per like panel, or like the way it's spread, evenly
Oh,
distributed,
wow.
it's not much. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And one of the criteria was that the building be built to current seismic rules. So that kicked out one or two other locations. It's just about the funding that we had wouldn't have covered any kind of significant roof repairs. So we wanted for our site to be as ready as possible.
Beautiful. Thank you for taking those questions, guys. We're going back one more slide or two more slides?
We're going forward. Two more slides, and Bianca's going to take over.
All right. And thank you, everybody. I know the slides are changing slightly slower.
Go back one. Are we going back? Oh, never mind. Sorry. We went back and then forward too. So thanks, me again. And so again, like Uzma walked you through all of that, and it's like the system was designed and built, so like imagine it's seamlessly done, and then so now we have to interconnect with the utility grid. So that's another huge learning for us, is these systems as they come in our service territory, and we're the customer in this case. What are the requirements that are going to be looked at and used to connect this to the utility grid? And so here are some of the interconnection considerations that were done in the impact study. So inverters were IEEE 1547 compliant with rapid shutdown. They had lockable disconnect switch, which because it was 25 kW over. It was local generation on a circuit was below 10% of the feeder peak load. And also with the lockable disconnects, we have multiple disconnects. I think there's a disconnect on the pole, and then there's disconnects for the battery in the equipment. And so just making sure all those exist for the system. And then we obviously had to comply with all the applicable City Light electric service requirements. So I think City Light posts those online, and we work with our electric service engineer and looked at, okay, based off of like point of demarcation and what's required to connect this based off the system size. And so that's kind of like every service will have that unique factor to it. And so that was a part of the assessment. Also, that the voltage level was within acceptable range during operation, and it was 3% plus or minus a transformer to service point. And so again, we have to have those visible breaks. So like the battery disconnect as well, switch to the pole, and some of the requirements that were key for this, is not using like all the NEC kind of codes apply to this. So like using the CT section as a raceway. And I think for these systems where we went to the community and wanted like a really big space, and it's like, well, we can't use grass, and land is limited. So we want to preserve the environment. And so it's kind of like, how can we fit this in the site without impacting trees, without impacting green space and the community space? And so you kind of like, we found that the trash enclosure, it's like, okay, everyone likes this spot. Now let's like Tetris it to make sure we're meeting everything in code and also giving enough space for fire safety. And so making sure you're not using like your CT section as a raceway, like when you're trying to cramp up spaces and things like that. So your electric service engineer works with you. And I'll give a shout out to Tanya and Joe Bartek. They've been really great to work with. Next slide.
So just, I'm going to take a little interrupt and say that one of the really challenging, but we felt important portions of this project was, as Bianca said, we were our own customer. So we did not use any shortcuts. We did not call people and say, hey, here's my project. Can you kind of make it work through the system? We actually followed the process. And when there's normal wait time for other customers, there was normal wait time for us. We asked everyone not to give us special treatment. And that's part of what we wanted to learn, was what it feels like to be a customer of Seattle City Light. And we can take that back and share that with our colleagues, and hopefully a nice way that we say, can we help work on these bits and pieces? So back to you, Bianca. I just wanted to commend you for that, because I think that's really, a lot of people might think, oh, yeah, it was easy for you because, and it's like,
no, it's like
no,
undercover boss, like, we're the customer, which is great. Like you said, it's key to the learnings to understand the customer experience. And if there are areas within that experience we can improve, provide information, areas support, that's what we're doing. We're trying to improve that if we see anything. But again, like here's we are also kind of providing technical knowledge to our engineers and crews. For example, planning engineers have the opportunity to understand the process change with setting IEEE 1547 inverters, which are new smart inverters, and anticipating a battery's implications when they are interconnecting with our grid. So we are also looking at modeling microgrids and batteries ourselves. And so we'll be assessing I think this is cool, but we'll be assessing the benefits of cycling a battery to reduce demand for customers. So for example, the center has like a peak load day where it is very active, and we can cycle the battery on that day to help reduce their demand charge. And so some customers are going to be looking at this for that need. So we're looking at that for energy management. And we are also considering what is needed for safety and fire response plan that will help communicate with the site owner, first responders, and operators how to interact with the system day to day and in an emergency event. And the project is also, again, I think it's an aid electrification enablement by, I call it like it's mitigating risk for future battery and microgrid interconnections, thus like strengthening our ability as a utility to support our customers' electrification desires. So we see these technologies are crucial to our electrified future as they provide efficiencies and flexibility for planning for load growth. And then some value adds we are also identifying areas like we're beyond the meter. We don't do services beyond the meter as a utility. So for new services and programs for customer-sided equipment, conservation, and microgrids. So there's long-term value also for the site as like a test bed. If we have certain things and work with our community center, as you said, why don't we want to try to integrate new renewable fuel cell technology? Is that possible? So that's great. And for the next slide, I'm going to kind of just, I think it'll be helpful for me before I start it, just like to understand the construction process. And so I'm going to kind of just walk you through construction here. So this is kind of our site. And there was like a car there, so I had to like Photoshop. But this is our site before. This is that trash enclosure with the bays there, the drainage. You see we have like, there's a retaining wall to the right, and there's also a step there. So that's why you see the fence has like an angle, because like it has to be 8 feet for physical security safety. And it was weird because it's like on the ground. Again, it's a weird site. So it's like we work to say, oh, what if we angle the fence so it's 8 feet all around and then looks like one component, as opposed to just like a bunch of fences and lines, and then someone could use it to like crawl over and climb over. And I'm happy we did that, because we had a temporary fencing before we installed this, and there was a lot of break-ins, and it was an issue, and we were worried about the equipment, and we had like constant mobile patrols. And since we erected this fence, we've had no issues. So it's proven to the physical barrier has proven to help. And they can't climb it because it's anti-climb, and again, it's non-conductive. So it's flame retardant, won't burn up. It's hard to break. They've like done like little, trying to cut it. It can't be cut. It's not like cheap plastic. So it's a different fence. I think our physical security is looking at that too. So it's like a mini pilot within a pilot. And it was just kind of like because of the space and the grounding requirements, it was good to have a non-conductive fence. And so that was also a need that was met. And so just the next slide. This is the pit after demolition, and everything was taken out. And so you kind of just see the big gaping hole in the stair area. And the next slide. So here is where we laid conduit and rerouted some drainage because we didn't want water by the battery conduits. And so we had to reroute some drainage to make sure that they stay clear of water. Then we just laid the conduit. And the next slide, you'll see when we buried it with soil, the excavator. And then you'll see on the wall, there's that, we painted the pipes, but there's a connection of pipes. So just like to help the drainage at the site. And luckily, this is kind of like a secondary roof where it's not the primary drainage for rain. So there's not a lot of concern on water, but still we had to address it with like a drainage plan and making sure it flowed into the existing drainage back in the grassy area to the left. And in the next slide, you'll see our crews, if it loads. I'll give it a second. Has it changed? I think I still see.
Sorry, I'm hearing comments on those slides. I think slight connection issue.
Okay, did you want to go back one slide? Did they see the burying or no? But this side, you'll see the rebar and frames being placed for the concrete.
As the slide loads, Bianca, we have a question asking, does the community center have or need an emergency power generator? If so, did this project replace a fossil fuel powered emergency generator, or was this just the first one?
This replaces that need for the generator that they wanted on the site. So this is their backup power system.
This site did not have an existing emergency backup generator. There is a connection for a drive-up emergency generator that could be made. We left that connection just to make sure that we left as many options as possible. The intent is for this to be the emergency backup for this community center. But we left some options.
All right, so you can kind of move forward. I think the next slide. So again, this is rebar, the frames being set for construction, and then you see the conduit being laid on both pads. It's the battery pad they're on right now, and then to the right, that's where like the switchgear transformer gear is. Next slide. All right. This is the roof overlooking the north side of Miller. So this is like if you come into the community center, yeah, if you come into the community center, it's like the entryway. You see that little point. Now facing the sun. Next slide. All right, so this is them installing the battery, one of the batteries. And then you see to the left, there's that fence, which is like pretty steel, erect over there. And so it's our battery pad when it's finished. And then the crew's just loading the battery for installation. And the next slide.
So this is one of the 100 kilowatt / 400 kilowatt hour batteries. The second one.
Yep, and they each have their own inverter. So here's like, we're still, again, I think we're probably almost complete now, but this was taken when we still have some work to do, as you can see, with the fence and some cleaning and things like that. But 95% complete. We have the fence, we have most of the meters in, the battery installed, and the inverters. Next slide. And this is that picture Uzma had, which is great. And that's from the stairs. Wait till it goes.
Again, apologies for the network issues. It should be changing. So.
You're fine. Did you see like these stairs? It was funny. Is we don't know where they came from. We can't find them in plans all the way back to like the 1990s or 80s, and so that they're students use those stairs for the middle school, and we actually watch them cross. I'm like, okay, like this is technically not a part of a safe route to school location, but because it's like a natural thing that happens, we wanted to make sure, again with the fencing, we wanted to make sure the design was such that there's visibility of children if they're walking across. So from the road. So we actually looked at the visibility, and the fence type had to be such that it didn't create shadows for children. And that was kind of like why the fence was so unique, because it not only needed to support the grounding concerns, but also the community and the safety concerns of the children being that they use this site for to walk across the lawn, and we didn't want to create places where people can hide or like there's shadows. And so it had to flow light in such a way that you can see through it, which you can see kind of through it pretty clearly right now. So that was one thing that we considered for this, and 96% complete because our meter's in there, and we've like since then it's our crews are getting ready to do connection. And the next slide. So here's a timeline of key milestones. And so we did hold due to COVID in 2019, but I think everyone was pretty resilient, and that the team went back at the work in January of this year. And we are currently finalizing some wiring and getting ready for commissioning of the system. So we're preparing for commissioning and hope to be operational in June of this year. Next slide.
And then we'll do those analytics with the University of Washington
Yes.
and pack up the official portion of the project.
It'll be great. And then that report's going to be shared. So Commerce is going to get that and share that, and then as well as the utility. So all the learnings and how it performed based off how we intended for it to be designed, all the like lessons learned and technical information, I think is going to be great to be able to share with everyone.
And we expect to continue our learning beyond just the report. We're not done, but the report will be done.
We have a question on, hey, did you consider putting the batteries and PV together in a micro DC grid behind inverters to reduce inverter losses?
We did. We did talk about that, and we're actually putting together a project for the Clean Energy Fund 4, and in that we are proposing a DC microgrid. This one, it just felt like the amount, technology has gone leaps and has increased a lot, leapt forward a lot in the last few years. And we felt at that point that was probably not going to be the right solution. Talked to our owners engineers. Everyone was like, let's just do inverters here, AC connected. But for the next project, we're actually proposing a DC microgrid.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Sorry, Bianca, I jumped ahead.
No, you're good. That's exactly it. It's like the use case for this, it wasn't such applicable at the time, but we're still looking into that. It's not out of the norm. And then this is City Light's mission, vision, and values, which I feel the project embodies. Like City Light's vision is to create a shared energy future by partnering with our customers to meet their energy needs in whatever way they choose. Like I said earlier, and this pilot is helping us bring us one step closer to that vision. And so I just think that's something great to highlight. And that's it. So the next slide is just a big thank you all for listening to us today and for having us here. And we are all ears and mouths for questions.
Yeah, everybody, if you want to engage further, you have any questions on this great project that City Light is taking on, learning about microgrids, photovoltaics, battery storage, please type them into the chat. I know you guys have been typing questions throughout, so thank you for that as topics became relevant. I'm going to leave it on for a few more seconds. I do have one question, even though you partially answered it already, Uzma and Bianca, but we do have a question on, is the recording of this presentation going to be online? Yes, we are recording this session. It's going to be on the website lightingdesignlab.com. We also have the YouTube channel, Lighting Design Lab, on YouTube, and you'll be able to see this presentation recorded as well. But I wanted to see if there are next steps for the microgrid outside of those educational components that we're going to be doing. Are there any, where do we go from here, microgrid wise, from the city?
I can take a stab at that. This is one of the projects that we've identified in our grid modernization program to continue doing follow-ups on. We would like to make sure that our crews get additional training. How do we make sure that we take these learnings that have been, basically when you touch these projects, you learn about things that you didn't know about, right? So we've had some people participating. Now our goal is to get more and more people participating across the utility. So that's a really key, important internal employee engagement and education component from my point of view.
Yep.
Bianca?
Yeah, just looking at this, as you said, like we're working now closely with like our COO and deputy COO and our crew management and leadership, as well as like the crews we've been working with on the project, as to start saying, this is technically beyond the meter, it's a customer sided equipment, but what are some areas that we see what if we performed O&M for this in the future? Can we bring this in-house? If so, what are the proper training we need to make sure we provide before we do that? And what are some of the things we can improve in the customer experience if there are things that we've noticed, and what are some information we can give? What are some potential new services or programs? So I think a lot of this is like we're getting it done and looking at it and making notes of that as we're moving. And now it's like we shift to education, not just internally, but for the community. And so I think we talked to Parks about, and the middle school that it's there is, can we include this as part of like a science program or like a STEM program, because it's right there in our backyard, and we can like walk the students through and partner with the utility to have someone walk them through and give that level of education. And we were ecstatic about that. And we actually have like 1% for art, which we do with Seattle. And so the art's going to be there's going to be art, which didn't include in this presentation, but probably should have, but like there's going to be art within the facility that actually represents the project, and also the community helped create it. And it's kind of like the artist Julia Harris is kind of captured like her idea, and working with the community was like, it's kind of like photosynthesis, or like we're taking the sun and we're creating this something beautiful. And so she like represented that with like flowers and mosaics that the community actually like bent and created shapes with children, and the color scheme. And so that's going to be at the center with information about the project to help connect the community to the project and the community to the utility goals and the city goals for a green energy future all around. So I just think that's like ongoing with the community, and then also internally to look at this and look at lessons learned. Like what do we learn when we do this the next time? Let's try to improve the next time, and let's try to see what we can do differently, and from some of the things that we've captured as a part of the pilot, which is for learnings. And so that's.
And within city government, we've been working with the Parks Department, as we've mentioned many times already. So it's really good about building that relationship, and also about bringing technology to a group that perhaps might not have thought of this, right? So we're really proud of the fact that we're bringing to a community center a really fabulously new way of doing things. We're not taking away from what they had before, but we're giving them yet another option. And then another space that Bianca's working in is with the fire department. She has a meeting later on today, right, Bianca? I think you mentioned that. To talk to the fire department about how these types of equipment, and this is really about lithium-ion batteries that can be either in your phone, or you remember there were some kids' toys. I don't remember. It was like a scooter that was having trouble. But right, so we really want to work with the fire department and make sure that we and they are both educated about how to respond if, God forbid, something bad happens. That's good. Bianca, you've done a lot of work on emergency response and a safety plan for this, so I commend you on that.
Yeah, that's one of the key things with new technology is, fear could be the death of innovation. So it's like we need to make sure that it's completely safe and everyone is aware of how to interact with it. And it's we have like a great partnership with our fire department, and I think we have like 44 members that are trained to deal with electrical fires, and also trained to understand battery fires and what to do. And they're going to get like they understand the site layout and what to do and how to communicate with our crews. And so that's just key in these technologies. You know, it's very low risk, but you know, we still plan for that, especially as a utility.
Hopefully
Well,
you can see
Bianca,
that there's a broad amount of work.
Yeah, we have lots of work.
We still got work left.
Cut in. I like that. I just wanted to mention, I'm not seeing any more questions, but I am seeing many comments on, hey, great project, congratulations, very interesting project. So good comments here. Just thank you both for showing us a little bit about the microgrid. Great stuff the utility is doing. Thank you again for sharing, and bear with me. I want to make sure that there are no last questions, and no. So just thank you from the crowd, and thank you for your time. Everyone that joined us again, this is going to be recorded. It's going to be on the Lighting Design Lab website and YouTube page. And you can always engage with us at lightingdesignlab@seattle.gov. But I think we're going to give you guys back 30 minutes. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And thank you to our speakers.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. It's been our passion project, so we're happy to share it.
Bye, everyone.